worksheet first, and then we'll spend some time with the actual lesson plan itself and talking about P3 Strand 3, which is related to the pacing of the lesson. So how do we know from looking at this worksheet in particular that this is an advanced proficient example of the 2 strands of P1 that we look at Institute, and then the 2 strands of P3 that we can also discern from the worksheet, which is related to the content and related to the methods that are going to be used in this lesson. So what are the things that you pulled out of this, basically, that let you know that this is in fact an advanced proficient example of planning?
Well, for P1 Strand 1, part of being advanced proficient is being able to identify the extent of mastery, and I think that this exit does a good job of doing that because the teacher is asking the students to provide the first definition and then to actually pull an example from the passage, and also both of these are directly aligned to the level of rigor of the objective, which is identified.
I kind of agree, and I agree in that it does do this, but had the students needed to define it on their own independently, then I would say it wasn't aligned, but because in the intro to the new material, the students fill in the definition that's given to them, and then they use that to then go and identify it as aligned.
Yep, and I mean, maybe it would be helpful to explain too, especially those of you that work with the rubric a lot, like the difference between advanced proficiency and exemplary, to help even place advanced proficiency within the context of beginning proficient and exemplary. Is that something you can speak to for a second?
For P1 or for, and I guess I guess
for P1 Strand 1.
Higher order.
What was your comment about the filling in the definition part?
Well, it was more towards P3 Strand 1, I think. Because I was just like, when I was looking at the assessment, I thought students were going to have to be able to define on their own, but they don't in the intro to new material. In the intro to new material, the teacher gives them that, they complete it, and then they walk through an example in the guided practice, but in the independent practice they go and identify those elements using the definitions that they wrote down. More like just a graphic, like guided notes.
Why would you say that isn't aligned? If they did have to do it, if they did have to identify the definition.
And maybe I don't have my blues right, but defining what these means is different than being able to identify them.
Well, part of me thought that I wrote that I thought that would be advanced as far as like seeing where the learning breaks down. And I said if this assessment, because I didn't know, if these were all blank and they were defining and then applying after going through that, I thought that it would be able to.
Right, because you'd have to know what they are. I mean, I'm sure there's a lower level way to have them match the, the definition with the word.
The reason I was picking that out is because maybe I probably did this poorly too, but I looked at the key points, and the key points actually have them define it. Like the definition is part of the key points, so I felt like they should have been able to define in the assessment. So when you said that, I was almost thinking that it wasn't AP. But you're right, like looking at when you say identify, like you don't need to be able to define something. That's more comprehension or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the other strands here. Like, where are other places that you saw advanced proficient evidence in this worksheet, either as it relates to P3 or P1? I know we're going to come back to the group in just a minute.
Well, John talked about it a little bit with P3 Strand 1, looking at the key points, wanting the students to look at audience position and argument, and then going directly back to the objective that says you want them to be able to identify that. So it does just that. So that's why it's P there. So,
I certainly think that like all components of the lesson are aligned with the objective. There's no extraneous stuff.
For P3 Strand 2, I mean, she's definitely, or whoever the teacher is definitely following like the I do, we do, we do.
and I think with P3 Strand 2, what makes it not exemplary is if you look at what the students are doing, it's not innovative. I mean, it is good, it's aligned with the objective for what they're doing, but it's nothing that's innovative that the students are doing.
That's what I thought. Like, I felt like the timing. Like, I mean, like, the timing is great because like there's so much practice happening. Like, they definitely prioritize the practice to support the student learning. I wasn't sure about Strand 2 being AP. just because in the intro to new material, like they don't actually they don't model how they would ask the questions and like think aloud how I would find this in the article. They just say like, I think to Diana's point, like here's the definition, and then they're like, let's practice now. And like, do the kids know how to do that yet? I mean, I wouldn't be confident that they would be able to identify because they've never seen anyone do it.
It does say model how to ask who and what and why to identify these elements.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
It doesn't say, but I mean, it doesn't say think aloud, but I would imagine that would happen as